Hello, good people of YouTube. Welcome to episode 46 of What Makes This Song Special. As always, I'll be taking you on a little journey into my past, tell you a wee story about what the song in question makes me think about when I hear it. What does it take me back to in my life? Why is it a special song to me? We'll talk a wee bit about the singer's technique, and I'll follow up at the very end of the video with a wee clickbait for you to watch my own cover version of today's song. I've given you a few funny stories over the last few weeks. We haven't done a serious one for a while, so I thought I'd take the lightheartedness out of it for this week, tell you a wee bit more of a serious story. It's not really about the first time that I heard Dignity. Often I'll tell you the first time I heard a song and where I was. This one's more about what Dignity means to me as a song and why is it special to me, as the title suggests. The first time I heard Dignity, I was in an old schoolmate, Anthony Dempsey. I've talked about him before. I was in his house and he played it for me on his dad's very impressive hi-fi system, and I fell in love with the song immediately. The lyrics, the raw emotion of it. It's a great track. I think he put it onto like a CD for me with some other great songs that I hadn't heard before. Christopher Cross Sailing, which I've done an episode on. Aha, Take On Me, which I've also done an episode on. I think The Sun Always Shines on TV, also by Aha, was on that mixtape, along with some other Christopher Cross songs and various other things that I maybe wasn't aware of at that point in my life. And Anthony decided to sort of share with me and get me into some musical choices of his. The song reminds me of that last year of high school, becoming an adult, having great times with friends. But this song is special to me for so many other reasons. I could probably pick at least a dozen significant times in my life that this song has been there. But there's one night that really sticks out for me, and it was March 2013, which was 10 years ago, which is crazy because it feels like less than half of that. Back then I was playing so many weddings with my wedding band. I'm probably playing even more weddings than that now, but back then it was more band weddings, and I would do a handful of like ceremonies and daytime drinks receptions, whereas now I kind of split it half and half. I get a wee bit more fussy over the years and get fed up being out 4 or 5 nights in a row, getting home at 2 o'clock in the morning. So I got kind of greedy and decided not to travel more than an hour from Glasgow and all those types of things. So back then, there were some really long weekends. We'd only started the band maybe 3 or 4 years before that, so we were definitely just saying yes to everything. And yeah, when you take bookings 2-3 years in advance, you'll say yes because you think of the business, you think of the money, you think of all those things that come with having a successful business to run. And then when it comes to it, you think, oh my God, why am I playing so many weddings this month? And it becomes a bit daunting, which we don't do as much of anymore. So anyway, it was a weekend in March 2013, and we were playing 5 nights in a row. Me and my mate Michael, who was also in the band, we were also playing during the day for 2 of those weddings, so playing the bride down the aisle and then playing piano and singing for the drinks reception for a couple of hours. So really I had seven gigs to fulfill in 5 days. And wedding band gigs are long. It's not like going to see your favourite artist who plays for an hour and a half. You're playing for 4 hours with a half-hour break in the middle. So you're singing for a long time, maybe getting through 65, 70 songs in a night. It's a lot physically. It takes its toll. And so 5 nights in a row, 7 gigs in 5 days. And I was really ill at the time. I was very ill. I'd had a Lyme disease diagnosis a few months before this, which if you want to hear more about, you can watch the Bruce Springsteen Thunder Road episode. I'll maybe leave a wee link for that somewhere. You can go back and watch that. That was when I found out I had Lyme, and you can find out a wee bit more about Lyme disease. I had a host of strange, horrible symptoms, from unexplained pain, severe fatigue, headaches, breathlessness, to neurological things like sort of brain fog, forgetfulness, tingling in my fingers. It was a really low point in my life, that point. And in the week leading up to these gigs, I'd been trying this treatment called the gallbladder and liver cleanse. an alternative therapist that I'd been seeing had told me about it. And I was up for trying anything. Like anyone who's ever had a chronic illness will understand that you will literally do anything to get your life back out of pure desperation. If somebody says, "Oh, drink this water from the river, it's got healing properties," you'll have finished 2 pints of it before they've finished telling you why it's good for you. So the cleanse itself entailed drinking all sorts of crazy things, like glasses of olive oil. I like olive oil, but drinking a glass of olive oil is tough going. Believe me. Epsom salts, again, not pleasant. Lots of apple juice. And this happens over the course of a week. And then you apparently were to spend the last day passing these huge stones when you went to the bathroom until you feel like you've been sort of tipped upside down and emptied out from the inside. There's a cathartic sort of thought, or the thought of how, cathartic that might feel. Sort of getting all this junk out of your body just intrigued me immediately. So of course I was all in, and it was a surreal experience. I did end up passing lots of these really strange looking green stones. I'll spare you any more detail than that, but it was a bizarre experiment, and I did feel better after it. Some symptoms definitely eased, and some didn't, unfortunately. But I'd been instructed to repeat these cleanses every 6 weeks or so. You're supposed to do them every 6 weeks, every 2 months, until there are no stones left, and it's supposed to take maybe up to a year or so before you do one and there's nothing comes out, and you know that that's if this is really a real thing and it really works. I have no, to this day I don't really know. It definitely produced stones. So, but me being me, I was really impatient. I just wanted to be well. I'd been ill at this point for about 2.5 years, 3 years nearly, and yeah, impatient. Disregarded the advice, and believing that I could bend the rules to accelerate the results, I tried to do 2 cleanses in the space of a couple of weeks, and my body didn't cope with it. My body just didn't want to put up with that kind of. It was just too much. Basically, it was too much for me to cope with. My hope was to feel great from my upcoming summer holiday at the time and finally be back to full health. But during the last day of the second cleanse, I realised I'd gone too far. I had this fatigue come over me that sort of threatened to stop me from playing the busiest weekend of wedding gigs that we'd ever had. It was just terrible planning from me. The day before wedding number 1 of the 5, and I was struggling to think straight, struggling to walk around my flat at the time, let alone, entertain people, hundreds of people all weekend singing songs on stage and playing piano. The brain fog was just unbearable. My whole body was in agony, and it felt like a whole section of my brain had just been sort of switched off at the mains. I phoned Mike, who I mentioned was in the band, and told him what I'd done and how ill I felt. And we'd never ever cancelled somebody's wedding before, so that wasn't an option. We'd never ever wanted to do that. Still don't want to do that. It's just something that, you don't want to cancel somebody's big day. So it's a lot of pressure to just be there, turn up and do it. And I just didn't know how I was going to get through the upcoming gigs. A couple of hours later, Mike arrived to pick me up, tells me he's taking me somewhere. It's a surprise. He's found somebody that can help me, potentially. And of course, yeah, I'm up for anything. So yeah, cool, let's do it. If anybody can help get me back to full health, let's go. Without making the story too long, I'll shave some of the details, especially of the next part, and we'll cut to the chase. What his plan was, we ended up going for a colonic together. Basically, you get a tube shoved up your butt, and the therapist sort of empties you out like somebody's bleeding a radiator. Not a nice experience, very strange. And Mike was trying to help, but it was such a ridiculous experience, and it didn't change my symptoms at all, apart from making me laugh for an hour or so while it was happening, because it was just bizarre and embarrassing and all those things that make you kind of giggle. So the next day we were playing during the day at a wedding in the Western House Hotel in Ayrshire, and we played during the day for a couple of hours, which I just about managed, and then we had a couple of hours to wait for the other guys in the band to arrive. to play the evening reception with us. And as I said before, like a 4-hour gig. So on that break, I think I felt probably the worst I've ever felt in my life, both physically and emotionally. I was just finished. I was done. I wanted somebody to just give me an injection and put me down. I just felt horrendous. We lay in my car trying to get like a sleep or a snooze in on our break, and I couldn't stop shaking. I was shivering from the inside. It was like I was plugged into some sort of electrical current. My nervous system, my immune system were just completely fried, completely exhausted. And now this is where it gets really, really silly. And again, I don't think anybody will understand this unless they've been chronically ill before. On a forum that I'd been on for people with chronic fatigue and ME and Lyme disease and all these types of things, a few weeks earlier, somebody had mentioned this medication that he'd bought from China. It was said to make the patient feel pain-free, full of energy, back to normal. But the warning was that it only lasted for a finite amount of time, and then you quite often had like a horrible sort of come down from that nice high. So you'd feel kind of normal, put your symptoms at bay, but then potentially the next day you would feel twice as bad because it's a kind of false energy that would give you. I don't know how it worked. I can't remember. Actually, when I was kind of planning to do this episode, I went on to try and find them again, and I couldn't even find out what it was I took. So I don't know if it's been banned or if it's changed name or whatever. So anyway, but it was a medication that I had to get shipped across from China on a kind of dodgy website. And I'd ordered it, and I just kept it inside a sunglasses box in the glove compartment of my car. I didn't really intend to take it. I just liked the idea of having it there just in case I ever needed it. But that day was just so bad that I just sat staring at the glove compartment while Michael had a sleep in the passenger seat, wondering if the answer was in that glove compartment, just to get me a few hours to get me through the gig. So I woke Michael. I kind of didn't want to take them, but I woke him and I told him my intentions. And anybody that knows Mike would know that Mike would usually be like, yeah, just go for it. He's a very spontaneous guy. He's kind of up for anything. So when Michael tries to talk you out of doing something, you know that it's probably something that you definitely shouldn't be doing. But I just didn't think I would be able to get out of the car, to never mind sort of get onto a stage and play that night without some sort of miracle. And you know, in hindsight, I think most normal people would have just explained to the bride and groom that they were really ill, apologised and sorted something else out for them. But the thought of doing that was just never an option for me. I think at the time I had this fear that if I cancelled one wedding, or if I didn't show up for work one day, even though I was feeling dreadful and wanted to not turn up to work many days, the thought of doing that, I just had this fear that it would just open a gateway for me just to keep doing it, and that path frightened me. There's a lot of people in the chronic health world who just end up, you know, bedbound or housebound, and I just never. So I always just pushed on. So I opened the box, and inside the box there were these 5 little individually sealed syringes, filled with this yellow liquid. To say it was a low point is an understatement. I lifted my shirt, pressed the needle into my abdomen, squeezed, my hand was shaking, and 20 minutes later, as promised, I felt normal. I mean, I wasn't pain-free, I couldn't run a marathon, but I felt normal enough to play the gig. I felt okay. It had done what it promised to do. It had taken me from 10% energy up to about 70% energy, and I thought, well, I can get through tonight. And we played until midnight, and it went well. I sang all night. The dance floor was busy. Everybody enjoyed themselves. Huge relief. The next morning I woke up, and as promised, I felt absolutely horrific. Could barely crawl out of bed, and I knew I had to do it all over again that night. So yeah, I won't go into any more detail. You get the idea. It wasn't fun. I was forced to use the syringes twice more that weekend just to get me through those 7 gigs. It was a false wellness that they brought on. The last 2 nights when I came off stage, I actually ran to the bathroom and threw up. My body was so fatigued that I just couldn't stop shaking. And I binned the remaining 2 syringes after the final gig of that weekend, and never used them again, of course, or never ordered them again. But unfortunately, due to more kind of desperation, I ended up replacing them with a whole host of pharmaceutical drugs every weekend to get me through gigs in the month that followed. Ibuprofen, Lemsip Max, decongestant, steroid nasal sprays, anything else that I could think of to get rid of inflammation and pain. I'd previously never taken medication unless, it was absolutely necessary. I've always been kind of against taking, pharmaceutical drugs unless you need them. I'd become stuck in a horrible circle of needing and feeding this sort of addiction almost. I took them even though they weren't relieving any symptoms, and I've no idea why. Some things become a habit before you realise that they've become a habit. And anyway, so that's where we were that night. Anyway, the last night of the run of gigs, the 7 gigs in the 5th night, the bride had requested that Dignity by Deacon Blue was their last dance. A song that we've played so many times over the years. But I just remember as soon as the piano riff started, I could feel myself getting emotional. There was this huge release and relief as I sang the chorus with everybody singing along on the dance floor. I just thought, wow, I've made it. I've got to the end of this week. I defied the odds. I was still alive. It didn't even matter if I managed to sing it because I knew the crowd would sing it for me if I couldn't. It's one of those songs. It's a big anthem. And the song's lyrics took on like a new meaning to me that night. It's about escapism and the working classes and doing jobs we don't want to do so that we can one day live the life that we dreamed of. A sort of futile ideology, and one that I never really wanted to reflect my own existence. But I think that character is almost all of us in some way, shape or form. I think we've all been there. Probably more times than we would like to admit. And I certainly wasn't doing a job that I didn't enjoy or that I hated, like the character in the song, but I was sucking it up and getting on with it when all I wanted to do was sail away on that ship. For anyone that knows the lyrics, the crowd sang along to this incredible Glasgow anthem, this modern day folk masterpiece, and I had this unbelievable feeling of relief wash over me. I'd got through it and I would live to tell the tale. So that's my wee story. That's what the song kind of takes me. It's one of the things the song takes me back to. It takes me back to lots of happy things as well, but I suppose that was a happy night just from the point of view that I defied the odds. It was like a personal victory for me at that point when I was feeling so ill that I still managed to push through. And Dignity is just one of those songs that I've played, so many times. It's and unfortunately there have been many ups and downs with my long lime journey, as people have started calling it. It's been a horrendous journey at points. I don't say that for sympathy or anything like that. I talk about it because I want to raise awareness of Lyme disease, and not just that, but all chronic illnesses. There are so many people out there suffering with chronic symptoms from strange and misunderstood conditions, and I just think we need to do more to help everybody live a life that's pain-free. Anyway, we'll get to today's singer, Ricky Ross. Ricky Ross has a really interesting voice, so distinctive, and you can hear the Glasgow accent creep through as he sings his higher notes. And when he's singing in the middle of his range, he has this sort of transatlantic accent that a lot of Scots adopt, me included, because it takes some of the harshness out of the Scottish accent. He also has it's like a slight lisp, which gives his voice this beautiful, sort of fragile character, and somehow makes you listen to what he's got to say. A real songwriter's delivery, and such a recognisable tone that has captured the hearts of Scottish music lovers and many outside Scotland too. Great voice, Ricky Ross. So there it is. There's the story. There's the singer. It's a song I've performed probably 1,000 times in my career. I wonder if I've sung it more times than Ricky Ross. There's a question to be answered. I'm not sure. But I've sung the song a lot of times, and it is an amazing song. As I said, the lyrics, the music, everything about it's a fantastic track. Please hit part 2 to watch me do my version of Dignity by Deacon Blue. And please hit subscribe, like, share, and tune in next week for another song. Thanks so much.